Hey guys, Dan here. This is Dan Reviews It. Welcome to TV News and Reviews for the week. We've got 6 new shows to talk about, including 2 from the Marvel Universe. Disney Plus's What If, and then over on Disney Junior, Marvel's Spidey and His Amazing Friends. We're going to talk about the new Sandra Oh show on Netflix called The Chair. A couple of interesting sort of variety talk type shows on Peacock, Hart To Heart with Kevin Hart, and X-Rated with Andy Cohen. And something we mentioned last week that was renewed for season 2, I had not gotten to it yet, 100-Foot Wave on HBO. So we're going to talk about all of that. But first, of course, we need to talk about the TV news for the week. The big story, I guess, that just broke is more about the Jeopardy stuff. We've sort of been leading off with that lately. Mike Richards, who was going to be the host and then is not the host anymore, but was still retaining his executive producer status, that is also done. He will no longer be executive producer of Jeopardy, which, to be honest, makes complete sense. I mean, the story about him has gotten far more press than, anything lately with Jeopardy, really since Alex Trebek's passing. So all this whole year, 2021, they've been doing all these different guest hosts, of course, and I think not only the comments he made, 8 years ago on his podcast, and then the lawsuits 11 years ago with the Price is Right team, I think those maybe could have been negotiable for the executive producer status. But when all this stuff started coming out about sort of how he rigged this quote unquote, host search and sort of faked the whole thing anyway, so he would be the one to officially get it, and he sort of threw Ken Jennings under the bus at one point, and it just didn't make him look good, didn't make for a good working environment, certainly. So I can only imagine, what the sort of mood was like with him, in that building and at that time. So look, I think the story got to be bigger than anything that they had anticipated, and so to sort of quash all of that, Sony has let Mike go not only from Jeopardy, but from Wheel of Fortune as well, which is kind of interesting that they, just sort of fired him altogether. There was no controversy at Wheel of Fortune, but again, if you worked there, maybe you were like, well, I don't really want to work with this guy. So you could see that. I'm sure, look, I know how these things go. I'm sure he got a very, very sweet severance package and will not be hurting for the cash part. But yeah, I mean, his dreams of hosting anything, I would say at this point, are dead in the water. Mayim Bialik is scheduled to do the first 3 weeks of the new season. Beyond that, I'm not sure what they're going to do, honestly. But Ken Jennings working behind the scenes too, because he's been on as, I think, consultant for the last couple of years. So maybe that's a conflict of interest too, to have him, be the host. But look, Alex made it pretty clear, basically on his deathbed, that he wanted Ken to host the show. But, those words don't always, bear fruit. Bob Barker, when he retired, wanted Rosie O'Donnell very, very much to host Price is Right, and they went with Drew Carey anyway, a decision that Bob did not really care for. So I do have some news actually about Price is Right coming up, so we'll get to that. But let's move on to the renewals and the cancellations. Bunch of shows renewed, so let's actually just talk first about the one cancellation I have for you, and that is Betty. After 2 seasons, that's done on HBO. Most of the HBO and HBO Max stuff I really enjoy. Betty was not one of them. I think I gave it a D+ when I first reviewed it. It just didn't speak to me. It's about these skating teenagers and young adults, and look, I can enjoy something that I don't see myself in at all. But I just did not, this show did not click for me. So it did run 2 seasons, but it will not be back for a 3rd on HBO. So let's go over to the renewals. Let's see. Showtime has a couple of renewals in the pipeline. Deuces and Miro, a late night series, that has been renewed for season 4. I still have never seen 1 second of the show, but I feel like we talked about when it was renewed for the current season 3. So now it's been renewed again for season 4. Flatbush Misdemeanors for season 2, another show that I didn't really care for that much when I reviewed it recently, but that'll be back for season 2. And then another limited series that they've now turned around and said, okay, well, we're going to give this a 2nd season, so now it's just a regular series, and that is Your Honor with Bryan Cranston. I really did enjoy that first season. what I saw of it anyway. But what's interesting about it getting renewed is not only was it sort of billed as a limited series, much like White Lotus last week on HBO, we talked about that getting renewed for a season 2, even though it was limited, but this show, Your Honor, was actually submitted to the Emmys in the limited series category, and so now a month from now during the Emmys broadcast, or 3 weeks from now, whatever, it's actually nominated in several categories in the limited categories, and now we all know, well, it's not really a limited series anymore, so sort of seems a little shady, but all right. Stars has Run the World going for season 2. And that's one I kind of liked. It was sort of like the urban version of Sex and the City. I forget the one gal's name, but she was on Happy Together with Damon Wayans Jr. back in the day, like 3 seasons ago or something on CBS. So yeah, I kind of like that show. Cobra Kai going for season 5 on Netflix. Netflix doesn't usually renew things unless they're huge hits for more than about 3 years, but obviously Cobra Kai is a huge hit for them, and realistically this will be the 3rd season on Netflix because it started out seasons 1 and 2 on, I think it was YouTube, right? But anyway, season 4 hasn't even premiered yet. That will premiere in December. But obviously this show has, just a ton of accolades behind it, and is a audience favorite. So doesn't surprise me that we'll be seeing a season 5 of that. Kevin Can F Himself going for season 2 on AMC with an 8-episode season. Haven't made it through season 1 yet, but I watched, I think, the first 3 episodes before I reviewed it. This is the Annie Murphy show, her first thing after Schitt's Creek, and a really clever concept. One of my favorite shows so far in 2021. So happy that will be returning. And then this one, very interesting. We sort of touched on this a couple of weeks ago, but Manifest has officially been picked up for a 4th and final season on Netflix. We talked about this a few weeks ago because finally NBC released their last few shows that they were still on the fence about: Zoe's Extraordinary Playlist, Good Girls, and Manifest among them. And the first 2 seasons were then up on Netflix and were getting really great responses. It was, a permanent fixture in Netflix's top 10 for a few weeks. And so people were sort of theorizing, well, maybe it'll get picked up. So sure enough, I'm not sure if season 3 is on there yet, but season 3 will be on there. And then season 4 will be a 20-episode season, which is longer than any other season they had on NBC, which is kind of interesting. But it will be broken up into, segments. So I would assume probably a chunk of 10 episodes and then a hiatus and then another chunk of 10 episodes. So really, is it seasons 4 and 5? Yes, but contractually, for whatever reason, they are calling it season 4, an extended final season. So if you are a fan of Manifest, then there you go. You can check that show out. All right. So other than that, we have some odds and ends to talk about. Let's go back to The Price is Right, since we've already mentioned that a couple of times. It is starting its 50th season on September 13th. Now, this show has been on longer than I've been alive. There's not that many entertainment shows that fit that bill. Saturday Night Live premiered a few years before I was born, but 50 years means 1971 for this show. Bob Barker, of course, being there for those first 40 years or so. But there's going to be a 2-hour primetime special airing on September 30th, and that will include some interview clips with Bob Barker and Drew Carey, and I assume probably some of the models along the way, and show some, I guess, iconic moments from the show or whatever. I'll have to watch that because I'm a lifelong Price is Right fan, one of my favorites. Rachel Maddow signed a multi-year deal to return to MSNBC, or stay on MSNBC, I should say, in the 9 p.m. hour that she has hosted since 2008. There was some sort of, scuttlebutt about, well, maybe she will not be renewing the contract. Maybe she will, leave MSNBC for something else. But look, she's got the highest rated program on the network, so obviously they want to keep her happy. So she will be staying there. Carrie Ann Inaba is going to be leaving The Talk after 2.5 years. Now, they recently announced Jerry O'Connell will be the first male person on, male panelist on the show. He's going to replace Sharon Osbourne. But, at this point, there's nobody original from the talk. Everybody, Sharon Osbourne was the last remaining original person, and she's out after some controversial statements. And so I don't know what next season on the talk will look like, but I also don't know what the last 10 seasons of the talk look like, because I have not watched. But I did actually, I watched not religiously, but I watched an episode here or there. Like if there was a guest on, I was interested in those first couple of seasons with like Sarah Gilbert and Leah Remini and Holly Robinson Pete was on. So anyway, if you're a fan of the talk, Carrie Ann Inaba is out. Ava DuVernay has a special called Home Sweet Home. It's going to premiere in October. And I guess it's not really a special, but it's a series, but it's very interesting. It's a social experiment series, which follow families, or that will follow families who trade homes and lives. I don't know if that means they're switching, like going to work at this person's place of work or whatever, but it's more than wife swap. You're swapping your whole life, and obviously, sort of seeing how the other half lives, whatever that other half is, to these people. So Ava DuVernay, look, always sort of doing these, interesting, thought-provoking type of things. She's done a few documentaries, and she's done, I think she's part of Soul of a Nation that aired on ABC this spring. So that should be interesting. Look, I'm not a huge Steve Harvey fan. You might know that. But there's a Judge Steve Harvey show coming to ABC Primetime in 2022. And it's going to be, I guess, kind of like the Judge Jerry Springer show that they have weekdays now, where, Jerry Springer's not a judge. Steve Harvey's not an actual judge, but they're going to, sort of rule over these cases. And obviously the defendants and the plaintiffs both will sign agreements, I'm sure, ahead of time saying, like, look, we know these people aren't really judges, but we accept whatever their decision is anyway. I don't know, whatever. I guess I'll watch it to review it for you guys, but I'm not a huge Steve Harvey fan, so I'm not sure how I will like that. And then the last thing I have to talk about, The Problem with Jon Stewart on Apple TV Plus. I announced this weeks ago, but maybe a couple months ago by now. But we finally have a premiere date and know a little bit more about it. So it's going to air for the first time on September 30th. And unlike Apple TV Plus does do the every week thing for their series most of the time, but they also usually premiere 2 or 3 episodes up front and then go to one every week. So this is on a slightly different schedule. It will be not all at once, like most of their shows, but September 30th it will premiere, and then every other week will be a new episode. And then there will also be a supplemental podcast along with each episode. I don't know if the podcast will drop on the same date, or if it's like maybe they'll do the podcast on off weeks of airing the show. I don't know. But I'm a big Jon Stewart fan. I miss him dearly from the days of The Daily Show. And I love Trevor Noah as well, but I don't really have Comedy Central anymore, so it's not nightly viewing for me. I'll watch some clips here or there on YouTube. But when Jon Stewart was on, I watched The Daily Show every night for probably 14 or 15 years. And if I missed the night one, I would watch the next day airing at like 9 a.m. or whatever it was. So, all right, well, let's move on now to the reviews. We've got 6 of them to cover, and the biggest one by far is What If over on Disney Plus. This is the 4th Marvel show now that Disney Plus has aired just this year. It's the 4th overall, too, but they've all aired in 2021. We started with WandaVision. Then we went to The Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Then we went to Loki, which I need to finish. And now we've got What If. And so this is also based on one of their books, but it's essentially sort of a mashup or amalgamation of a lot of different properties under the Marvel umbrella, and it essentially explores alternate timelines in the multiverse that sort of show what might have happened if major events were happening differently. And for this particular version, I don't know how the comic books do it, but for the TV show, they're taking specific events and moments in the MCU, the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So they're taking some tips from these different scenes from the movies and stuff, and trying to figure out what if such and such. So the first 2 episodes, what if Captain Carter were the first Avenger, which we know as Agent Carter. I guess maybe she's a captain. I don't know much about that character, but I guess maybe she's a captain. But anyway, of course, we know Captain America as the first Avenger. So they're saying, well, what if Captain Carter was the first Avenger instead? And then number two, episode two was, what if T'Challa became a Star-Lord? So, of course, we're sort of combining their Black Panther and Guardians of the Galaxy. I think specifically mostly Volume 1, because, we see him as Star-Lord sort of in that cave in the opening scene of Guardians. We see that in the opening scene in episode 2 here. And then Chadwick Boseman. Okay, so let's talk about that first. That's sort of the thing I think that is kind of permeating all over this What If series, because it is Chadwick Boseman's final performances as T'Challa. Apparently, he's going to be in a few of the episodes as T'Challa, but this one he's one of the main stars of, and taking on that Star-Lord motif. So it is great to hear Chadwick Boseman's voice acting once again. I didn't realize this was going to be a thing that existed. I mean, I don't know if I just don't follow the Marvel Universe that well, or if it was kind of kept more hush-hush. I sort of thought his final performances that we were going to see was going to be in Netflix's film Ma Rainey's Black Bottom. But no, we've got a ton of, maybe not a ton, I don't know, but a bunch of this stuff for voice work for What If. So that, I think, is potentially the most interesting part of this series, and I think it is very touching to hear him, and it's very interesting to hear him doing T'Challa, but in a different setting. He's not the Black Panther in this. He is the Star-Lord. So I thought that was interesting. I really don't love the Captain America First Avenger movie. So the first episode I thought was okay, with Captain Carter, but not being as familiar with some of the scenes of that movie, because it's not one of my favorites, as I am with the scenes of Guardians of the Galaxy and the scenes of Black Panther. The first episode left me a little bit less than impressed. But here is the real, meat and potatoes of this show. The animation is excellent. I mean, it's astounding. It's great animation. This is not what we expect from television animation. And look, I think this is something that WandaVision excelled at. We talked about this. My buddy Tim and I did WandaVision, episode by episode reviews. WandaVision, it didn't feel like a TV show. It didn't look like a TV show, and certainly with the big budgets, it didn't play like a TV show at all. And nothing was more obvious about that than the 9 minutes of credits at the end of each episode. Most TV episodes get 45 seconds of credits or a minute of credits. This was a full, cinema experience with the credits. And so look, all of the Marvel shows really have been this way. Disney essentially just prints money over there whenever they put anything out with Marvel. But, of course, people aren't, these shows aren't getting box office results, so people aren't paying for these shows. But I guess the theory is people will sign up for Disney Plus because of these shows. Is What If going to make them sign up if they haven't already signed up when WandaVision was on, or Loki? I don't know. But maybe Boseman fans might. But anyway, so because of this, the animation is just, it's probably the best animation that's ever been on television. I would say some of the peak of television animation to this point is, harkens back to Batman, the animated series in the 90s. That sort of broke the mold for a new peak in TV animation. And here, I think Marvel's doing it this time with the What If show. The animation, gorgeous. Everything else, though, I think is a little hit or miss. First of all, they're sort of interesting scenarios, but you could do the same with pretty much anything in movies or television. You could certainly do the same with the Star Wars universe, and I'm not as well versed in that, but you could say, oh, what if such and such went to the dark side or whatever. But I was even thinking about it. Well, you could even do that with The Office or something. Oh, well, what if after Michael left, instead of Andy running the office, it was Jim or it was Stanley or, whoever. You could do this premise with basically anything. And it's sort of interesting it's interesting in theory to think like, oh, okay, what if T'Challa was a Star-Lord or what if this? Um, but in terms of then a 28, 29, 30-minute series, um, I don't know. I mean, I was not as invested in it as I was certainly with WandaVision, and even with Loki. Those first few episodes that I've watched so far, it was riveting. This I found to be interesting as a theory, as a what if theory. But in terms of a TV show, I don't know that it matters that much. And I'm not. I mean, I love the Marvel movies, I really do, but I'm not such a diehard fan of the MCU that I just, will eat up anything that they bring and, not have much meat or heft behind it. And I think that's what this show does. So the animation, top notch, gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous. Hearing Chadwick Boseman's final performances as T'Challa, also great. But in terms of the grand scheme of things, I think this is more of an interesting experiment than it is a series that I'm going to be, clamoring to watch. Oh, what's going to be next? What are they going to do next week on What If? Who's going to switch around? I don't know. So I will give What If a B. Next, we go over to Disney Junior, and I sort of vowed about 6-9 months ago that I was not going to do a lot of the little kid programming anymore. Because who really cares? And I'm certainly not in the age demo. But when there's something big like Marvel, like we did the Stanley's School for Gifted Kids or whatever it was on the cartoon channel. But look, it's a big Marvel thing. People are talking about it. Marvel's Spidey and His Amazing Friends, and it sort of takes the animation tip from the Spider-Verse, because we've got a few different of the Spider men and women in this. You've got Peter Parker as Spidey. You've got Miles Morales in here, and then Gwen Stacy as well, as Ghost Spider. And so it sort of takes a tip from the multiverse and the Spider-Verse and stuff, which I feel like a lot of kids probably saw. Even like little kids, I feel like probably saw that movie. It's much less violent than a lot of the, Marvel live action movies, and it's Spider-Man, and all the kids love Spider-Man. I know I was watching Spider-Man, the 60s series, I guess, when I was like 3. So it makes total sense. But this is airing on Disney Junior, and in that fashion, like they usually do, it's set into 2 segments per half-hour episode. So it's, 2 kind of chunks, 2 stories in the same half-hour episode. Patrick Stump from Fall Out Boy does the theme song and some of the songs within the show. Love that. Love Fall Out Boy. Honestly, one of my favorite bands, probably ever. Love those guys. So that was fun to hear him do the theme song. But look, this is just fun, and the voices, I don't recognize really any of the voice talent here. And there is a Black Panther in this, but Chadwick Boseman is not the Black Panther. So it's interesting to be doing 2 shows, not only from the Marvel Universe, but both actually do feature Black Panther. True Valentino is voicing him here. But it's not, everybody in the Marvel Universe, but there's a few names that we know. Hulk is here, Miss Marvel is here, and we've got Aunt May as well. So, quite a few people. Look, this is for little kids. So this is more about what are the lessons we're learning here, and they're pretty basic. Obviously working together is a huge factor here because there are the 3 of them, but they face off against classic Spider-Man villains. You've got Doc Ock, you've got the Rhino. So they're really taking a tip from, okay, look, this can be enjoyed by all ages because anybody that's into Spider-Man is going to kind of like this. Yeah, they, dial it down a little bit for the kids, but there's still a little bit of peril involved. Not as much as you would have, in, a Fox afternoon of the 90s kind of show like Batman the Animated Series or the X-Men cartoon. But the animation is cute. They do sort of stick with the type of animation from the Spider-Verse. It's not quite as well done, of course, because this is a little TV show on Disney Junior. But look, it's fun. The lessons are good. There's a few jokes here and there, but it is sort of, watered down for the kids. I would say the ideal age for this show is probably 4 through, maybe 7 or 8. And then they graduate maybe to the live action Spider-Man stuff. I don't know. But I think this is a cute show. I don't think we need to spend a ton of time on it. So I will leave it with a B+. So let's go next to The Chair. This is over on Netflix. Sandra Oh from Grey's Anatomy and many other things. I just saw her recently in something. Oh, it's an old movie, though. I watched Princess Diaries for the first time, and she's the principal in that. And sort of ironic here, because here she is the chair of the English department at a college. So, not quite principal, but sort of in that vein with having some authority. So she plays Ji-yoon Kim, and she is the newly appointed chair of the English department. But she's not only the first Asian person chosen for the position, but she's the first woman as well. So she checks a few different boxes for this college. But at the same time, this is kind of an ensemble show. It's certainly not just her show, even though she is the sole person on the poster. I think she is the one that will get people to sort of be interested in this because of her celebrity. But there's a lot of people here in the mix. Jay Duplass plays her friend and colleague whose wife he just lost to death, and his daughter's going away to college, so he is, falling back into some of his drunken ways and becoming kind of an embarrassment for the school, so she's got to kind of clean up his messes, but he is also an English teacher there. Bob Balaban is a senior faculty member in the department that sort of hates that she's there. You've got Holland Taylor as well. Always love to see her back from the Bosom Buddies days. Always one of the bright spots in 2.5 Men, that's for sure. But she's one of the senior faculty members, worried that she's going to lose her job because they're sort of making cutbacks for some of the older people. So I watched 3 episodes of this, and it's Netflix, so all of the episodes are up now. I think, is it 8 or 10 total on this one? I think, it's just 6 actually. I probably actually could have binged this whole thing because they're only half-hour episodes. So maybe I could have actually binged all of it. And I'll tell you what, if it wasn't late enough at night, I probably would have, because after episode 3, each episode kind of leaves you on a cliffhanger. After the 3rd one, I was like, man, I kind of want to stay up and watch that, but it was like 2 in the morning and I had to work the next day. So I didn't. But if I knew it was only 6 episodes, maybe I would have. But I really like the show. Look, it is soapy. And it's a little bit, not quite campy, but it's definitely in that sort of over-the-top, soapy kind of vein. So I'm not saying that this is, brilliant writing or anything, but I think these guys and gals all work together great as a team. The chemistry is pretty strong here, and I don't think I've seen Sandra Oh in too many things since she left Grey's Anatomy. I know she was on Killing Eve, which I just said it the other day when I reviewed Free Guy, because Jodie Comer is in that. I gotta watch Killing Eve. I know it's one of the most critically and commercially loved shows of the last 5 years. I gotta get on it. I know, but I didn't. So I haven't seen her doing too much. She pops up in a movie here or there, but I always liked her. I only watched Grey's for 2.5 years, but she was always one of my favorites on there. And of course, going back to the movies, Sideways and stuff like that. I'm a Sandra Oh fan, so when I found out she was doing this show, I was pretty excited. It is billed as a comedy drama, and I think that is proper billing. Last week we talked about Mr. Corman on Apple TV Plus. No, that is a drama. 90%, maybe 10% comedy. This does actually have a pretty decent split. I think it's probably maybe not quite 50-50, but there's definitely some humorous moments, and many of them, and humorous situations as well. But it leans into a little bit of drama. But I would say this is probably 65 comedy, 35 drama, maybe. But I like these characters. They're all pretty flawed as well, especially the Jay Duplass character, but Sandra Oh sort of getting her footing, and we see this, all the time. It's sort of a common trope of, oh, you're the first woman to do such and such, or you're the first woman of color to do such and such. All right, so that's sort of, tried and true, but she makes it work. If you are a fan of that sort of comedic, soapy kind of thing like Desperate Housewives or Ally McBeal or any of those that have sort of strong but flawed female characters, I think this will be one for you. I did enjoy it, and at only 6 episodes, I suppose you can kill this whole show in less than 3 hours if you wanted to. I'm going to leave the chair with a B+. So next we go to Peacock for a couple of variety type shows, I guess. And I guess we'll talk about them one by one, but they're both, of the non-scripted variety. Hart to Heart is a talk show fronted by Kevin Hart. And so he has a sit down for like 45, 50 minutes with a celebrity, one person per show, and over wine, or in some cases, in the Don Cheadle episode, for example, I guess he's maybe in recovery, I don't know, but he just drank water. But they have a sommelier come out and talk about the wine and whatever, and then they get sort of down to the nitty gritty. Let's talk. So few things I liked, few things I don't like. I guess we'll go with the negatives first so we can sort of end on a more positive note. So one of the things I don't like is that Kevin Hart does tend to make the show probably a little bit more about himself than he needs to. However, I am learning that's something that I don't hate. Which explains why Conan is like my favorite talk show, because he actually does this a lot too. But I love the Smartless podcast with Jason Bateman and Will Arnett and Sean Hayes. And sort of that part of that show's dynamic is the three of them sort of also sharing their own stories in addition to the celebrity sharing theirs, and sort of, barbing back and forth with each other. So I am learning that maybe the host kind of talking a lot about themselves isn't the most negative thing. But I do think Kevin Hart does it a little too much. And I think that he sort of is making the show a bigger, like, to seem like a bigger deal or something than it really is. Like in the first episode, he talks with Miley Cyrus, and they have this conversation about sort of the business of celebrity, being a celebrity, what that means. And so she was kind of saying about growing up in the spotlight and how she didn't realize, what sorts of tolls it took at the time, and da-da-da-da-da. And, he stopped her and was kind of like, yeah, like, just you and I having this conversation, that is like, that's really putting it out into the world, and da-da-da-da-da. And I just thought, all right, let's calm down. This isn't, reinventing the wheel here. You're having a conversation over a glass of wine with another famous person. So, I think there are times when he certainly, I think, is making the show seem bigger or more important than it really is, when really it's just a nice interview show. So over to the positives, it is a nice interview show. One thing Kevin talks about a lot is, and this is maybe sort of another negative, but he makes it a point, to kind of talk about how, look, on regular talk shows, people go on and they, get a pre-interview with the producer and this and that and the other thing, and we don't do that here. We go unscripted and blah, blah, blah. All right, well, that's pretty commonplace these days, maybe not for the nightly talk shows, but again, to bring up Smartless, the podcast, the whole premise of that show is only one of the 3 guys knows who the guest is, and the other 2 don't have a clue. So there's no prep really there either, So I think it's a lot more common these days with a lot of the podcasts and stuff. But anyway, but I really have been enjoying the long form interviews that a lot of these recent talk shows have. And Smartless is a great podcast. I can't recommend it enough. If you're a fan of any of those people or of Arrested Development or whatever, but they will talk to the person for like 45, 50 minutes. And I really just love and the Mark Maron podcast. I love long form interviews because you really get to know somebody. Now, if you don't necessarily know anything or care anything about the subject matter, or the interview subject, I should say, Like Kelly Clarkson was on, I think, the third episode, maybe. Like, if you don't care about Kelly Clarkson or American Idol or her talk show or anything like that, or you don't like her music, I'm not sure if you'll be interested in it, but there have been people on Smart List that I've never even heard of. Sometimes I'll have a sports star on or something, and I still find the conversation interesting. I like conversations with people, and those are the kind of podcasts I like. That's whatever. So I think Kevin Hart is an okay interviewer. He's not great, but I do like the topics they're talking about. Miley had some really interesting things to say. I think she's an interesting person. Don Cheadle had interesting things to say. And this is one of the shows on Peacock, by the way. You don't have to have a premium account to watch every episode of. Some of their originals, you can watch like one or two episodes and then they cut you off unless you pay for it. But this one you actually can watch even if you're not a paying member of Peacock. So I like that too. I think this is a decent show. I always say it with talk shows. It is hard right away because it's hard to interview people. It really is. And so I think there is, sort of a learning curve with it. I wish Kevin Hart wasn't maybe so full of himself or the concept of his own show. But I think the interviews are really interesting. I think they talk about some cool things. And he's been a friend of Don Cheadle's for years, and some things came out that he never knew about Don. So I really, if you like interview shows, especially long form interviews, you could do a lot worse than Hart to Heart. So this one gets a B+ from me as well. Next, we're going to talk about X-Rated. This is not so much a talk show as it is, I guess, a reality show, you could call it. It's basically Andy Cohen, of course, the host of Watch What Happens Live, and he's a book author, and I guess he's still the head of programming at E! Or whatever. But look, I can kind of take or leave Andy Cohen. I think he is, again, talk about somebody who's kind of full of himself. And I think, his sort of questioning in his own talk show on Watch What Happens, I think can really cross that line. And that's sort of his shtick. He really likes to try and, catch his interview subjects at a vulnerable moment or whatever. So here, the premise of this show, he's the host of it, and the premise is they bring somebody on, and then they bring a few of their exes on to rate this person on 20 different things, for everything from kissing technique to foreplay to flirtation skills to being in a relationship with them. How are they in some of those areas? It's not all sexual, but yeah, just stuff like that. And so then the person rates themselves, and then their ex rates them, and then they have a discussion about it. This is some really lowest common denominator stuff. I mean, look, I don't like a lot of the shows Andy Cohen has brought to E! He's had a hand in a lot of that stuff on like the Kardashian stuff. I know Ryan Seacrest has as well, but look, this to me is just sort of, Gawker television. It reminds me of like the paternity tests on Maury or anything on Jerry Springer or that kind of thing. Like, who is going on to a show to get rated by their ex-boyfriends and girlfriends? It's just weird. I only made it through one episode of this, and what's funny is, so the Kevin Hart show is like 50 minutes, and that was a breeze. I watched 3 of them back to back, no problem. Very interesting. This is only a half-hour show, or like maybe like 34 minutes or something like that. I couldn't believe it. By the end of it, I was like, that wasn't an hour-long show. It just seemed to drag because they only have one person per episode. So for 34 minutes, just about, we're diving into this one specific person's everything. Oh, I think I'm a great kisser. Well, I think you stink, and here's why. I mean, look, I've definitely been honest with certain exes about different techniques or whatever, because I want people to improve themselves for the next person they date or whatever, in my opinion, for whatever that's even worth. But like, to do it on a sort of national scale and in front of this sort of gossipy host, it just seems all ridiculous. And I used the word gross last week a lot when I talked about the HBO Max show, The Prince. I feel like this is gross too. I don't understand who would go on this show. Uh, I don't understand who watches this for entertainment. I know this type of show has a lot of fans. I get it, but I hate the Kardashians. I hate all of that kind of stuff. Anyway, oh, speaking of the Kardashians, by the way, as an aside, I wanted to review the show Cooking with Paris on Netflix because, it was getting some buzz. Paris Hilton's been out of the news for a while, and I don't hate her. So I was like, all right, I'm going to put this show on and try and review it. I got through about 8 minutes, and they brought Kim Kardashian out, and they were doing all this stupid, like, ditzy stuff that they're kind of known for in their whole shtick, and I had to turn it off. I was like, I could review this show, but it would just be unfair, because I don't watch anything like this, and it would be probably an F, well, it must be an F if it's unwatchable for even 10 minutes, but this is kind of in that camp. Like, if you like this kind of gawky type of show, maybe you'll get something out of this. I just thought this was stupid and gross, and who goes on these shows? X-rated gets a D from me. So finally, we go to 100 Foot Wave. This is on HBO, and this is a show we talked about last week because it got renewed for season 2, and it's a reality. It's a docu-series, not quite reality show, but a docu-series. And I don't always do that because there's just so many of them every month that it would be almost impossible to keep up with. But this is getting a lot of buzz, and since it did get renewed for season 2, I figured, okay, I'll check it out. So this is about surf culture basically, but specifically around this surfer Garrett McNamara, and some of the different places he's traveled to do some of these waves and his kind of life with surfing. And he wants to go to Nazaré, Portugal, so they've filmed him there actually taking a 100-foot wave, but then he finds out, oh no, there's 120-foot waves and 140-foot waves, whatever, so let's go to other places. So they talked to a few other big name surfers. I had heard of the one person, but most of it is really about this McNamara dude, and about how he sort of, gave up surfing for a little while because he decided, well, I'm in my mid-30s, it's time to be an adult. And then he started like this surfboard shop, but he missed it too much, so he went back. So a lot of the first episode is just kind of about his life, and okay. I don't know that this needed to be a whole series, let alone several seasons of a series. I think there is enough material here for a great long documentary movie, maybe a little over 2 hours or whatever. But these are, hour-long episodes. There's 6 episodes in the first season. I think it's maybe a little bit extreme to dedicate so much time just to this one person. I mean, yes, there's other people involved, but I think this would have been better as a documentary series, not quite a series, or a documentary film rather, and not quite a series. So with that being said, the footage is gorgeous. It's so cool. And I'm not a surfer. I don't really care about any of this stuff, but I have seen surfing movies, and I think I did see a documentary once about surfing. And I think what a great documentary does is kind of bring in people that aren't necessarily interested in the subject and making it interesting to them. And I've certainly had that with several documentaries that I've seen, where I'm just like, well, whatever, I don't think I'm going to like this because I don't like the subject matter. And then it just blows me away, made me sort of, really, regret watching that documentary off for so long. There's several examples of that in my life, but this, I think, gets a little long in the tooth. By the end of the second episode, I was kind of like, okay, I don't really care about what happens next. I don't really care that much about this particular dude. Like, maybe, like I said, if they had broken it up amongst many different surfers. But look, this is all about this one guy's journey, and I get that. Other than some real breathtaking shots, I'm not sure if this particular show is going to be for a non-surfer or a non-sports guy. So that's all I can really say about that. If you are into surfing, this is probably like great and amazing, and maybe you even know who this dude is and have followed his career and stuff. But if that's the case, you probably know a lot of what they're talking about anyway. So, again, much like What If on Disney, there is a lot of gorgeous, here footage of, waves and stuff, and What If it was the animation. But I'm not sure this can sustain several seasons worth of material. So I will leave 100-Foot Wave with a B minus. So that's going to do it. I am trying to get these up every 5 to 6 days because I fell a bit behind. So I know there's a bunch of shows that have aired in the last week or two that I need to still get to. Nine Perfect Strangers is certainly one of them. There's a new Steve Martin and Martin Short show that just premiered on Hulu, I think, over the weekend. So I want to watch that. Fantasy Island on Fox. There's a bunch of stuff out. So I'm going to try and get to all of that before we start fall TV season in like the third week of September or so. So keep that in mind. Keep on coming back for more TV news and reviews. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.